I think a lot of times, students have an issue with they want to go to a particular city, or they don't necessarily want to move too much. How is that of like how you were able to take that step and decide that would be okay in terms of that moving around a lot in the early part of your career, or probably not going to cities that that were usually
Glamorous.
The hot spot.
Yeah. It because I grew up in a small town, the small town part didn't bother me. I will tell you that being mobile in your career it opens doors for you that won't get opened otherwise. Companies need people who are willing to take what they learn at one location and go to another location. And depending upon the kind of organization that you're in, I look at Sysco. We do have spots in big cities, but we also have spots in, Baraboo and other places, Baraboo, Wisconsin, and little bitty places in Idaho and Intermountain. And oftentimes, if you're willing to take those smaller assignments, you'll get experiences at a faster pace because maybe not so many people want that assignment.
How do you showcase to your manager or the higher ups that you're ready to take on that early in your career without seeming like you are kind of like a stereotypical millennial Gen Z?
Yeah.
Pushing for it.
For those really brave souls out there, I really encourage you to think about roles like don't be afraid to go in as a supervisor in a distribution center. Don't be afraid to go in as a manager in a retail location or a supervisor or manager in an e-commerce fulfillment operation. We're constantly looking for smart people who want to come in those entry-level roles. And what we typically see is if I get, we have an intern program that's really only in its second year, and we doubled in size this year. And when I get these really bright, energetic young people in those roles, their careers progress much faster than the more traditional, someone who joined us as a truck driver has been in that role for several years and then they move into supervision. Instead, we seed these people around the country with an eye on them and hoping they'll be willing to relocate, hoping they'll be willing to take harder assignments.
Eventually you found yourself in fashion, right?
Yeah.
At my course. And so I guess, how does that happen and how did you know that was the right choice to go from, and again, there's a few other moves in between, but you went eventually from Toys R Us to Michael Kors. And so how do you make that jump and decide like that's where you're going to go next?
So a recruiter happened and said, hey, Michael Kors has grown so exponentially that they now realize they need to build out a professional supply chain organization. And they're interested in talking to you about doing that. And I think in supply chain, what's awesome about it as a career is that the basic fundamentals are the same, whether you're moving boxes, of groceries, or you're moving e-commerce orders, or you're doing ocean freight delivery. The skills are really transferable. And it is a sector in which you can move within industrial segments really successfully. And lots of people do that. And it's one of the other reasons I think it's a fascinating career path for people to consider. And after a couple of years, we decided to spread our wings a little bit. And at the time I was running company strategy. I did that for a couple of years. And we decided to buy Jimmy Choo and Versace. Bought Jimmy Choo first, and then we bought Versace. And I had the opportunity to lead the transformation office and to actually integrate the companies. But again, I found that my basic training in being a good communicator, being very process oriented, having a good understanding of tech and how tech actually works within a company really lit itself well to that really big job. That was a lot of fun.
And maybe you touched on it like, now just about the international aspect and even your role now at Sysco, is that, is that actually a big, do you think, important piece of a young person's career today to try to get some international, so leadership experience and international experience? Do you think kind of those two things can really set kind of a rocket ship through your career?
I think it's going to happen a few years into your career, right? It would be a little bit unusual, other than maybe in some finance firms or places like that. But it would be a little bit unusual to take a freshly minted college grad and give them an expat assignment. That would be unusual. But those opportunities will come up typically 7, 8 years into your career. So you start to think about you've been in for a while, you know the company, you've proven yourself, you've proven you're up for challenges. And if you ever get the chance to take even, a short term, we do assignments that are 6 months in length, and we do assignments that are 2 or 3 years in length. And raising your hand and saying, I'd love to go and do that will certainly propel your career.
As everything kind of moves a little bit more remote, what do you suggest for students who are going to enter the workforce and they'll probably have a lot less physical interaction with people than they had in the past? How can you still kind of build those relationships, as you talked about, that are crucial, everything like that?
Yeah. So if you did choose for the two of the three that I talked about, the sales consultants and the warehouse, the operator roles, those are all in person. There's no such thing as a remote sales consultant or a remote warehouse operator. But if you take one of the roles that's more analytics based, there's our company has a very large group of what we call associate resource groups. So it's it's everything from I actually lead an associate resource group called Bridge. And our mission in life is to bridge generations and to bridge associates that are remote versus associates that are in office. And so we do things like host all kinds of events. We do training seminars. I would really encourage you. It's another reason I'm biased toward big companies. Join those groups. Get involved. There are informal networks at every company, and we have resource groups for veterans. We have resource groups for our Black associates. Every kind of if you want to be a mentor, there's a resource group for that. And most of our up and comers they're not only members of a couple of them, they volunteer for leadership roles within those groups. And that starts to really give them exposure and get them better known throughout the company. It opens some unusual doors for them often.